Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Al Baqarah, and we will cover verses 39 to 48. The account of Bani Israel, part 1. These are the references, and some excerpts in this presentation have been taken from the meanings of the Quran, volume 2. And this is our contact. Recap verses 30 to 38 of Surah Al Baqarah, the account of Adam. We covered it previous Sunday. These 9 verses set the scene for us to understand the basis of the creation of Adam, which is man and woman as equals, and what we should expect from the finite physical existence on earth. These point briefly to the existence of choice and intent, that is through our sense of identity, the universal forces, that is malaika, called in the Quran, made available to man, the potential to characterize the things of the universe, the rebellious proclivities termed as Iblis and Shaitan within the psyche of man, and to become aware of the divisive inclination which can affect our collective social life. These were some of the aspects which we went through under these verses. It is also pointed out to man that his life on the planet is meant to be collective while maintaining a strong sense of identity and individuality. And that was important because we do not lose our own sense of identity and individuality because we possess a self, which is indivisible, which cannot be subdivided. But at the same time, by coming together, we form a system. He is informed, that is man, right at the outset, that he should not end up creating mutual enmity and imbalances through his wrong choices. Also implicit in this metaphorical account is the accountability of man's decision making, and he is informed about Tawbah and the Law of Requital. The Quran advises man that if he decides to live under the control of his unbridled desires and intellect, then his world will consist of fear and grief. And this fear and grief was briefly mentioned in verse 30 was through bloodshed and chaos. However, if he wishes to extricate himself from this state of affairs in his world, then he needs only to follow the guidance of Allah made available from the start and which is now preserved in the Quran for all times. The Quran here presents this tangible choice before man during his finite stay on earth. So we ended up with this conclusion that without the Quran, man has no choice. That is, man is forced to live under man-made systems in which he is born. But with the arrival of the Quran and with the availability of the Quranic system of deen, man has a choice. Let us go to the first verse of today's talk, verse 39. There is a consequence implicit in whatever we do. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَكَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. But those people who will refuse to accept this guidance and will falsify its truths, according to our law of requital, they will have a life of permanent azab or punishment because of their own deeds. And this life will be full of fear and grief, both in this life as well as in the hereafter. Because according to the Quran, this life is linked to the life of the hereafter at human self's level. Harnessing the universal forces is the stature of being Adam, i.e. the correct stature of man in the universe. And to utilize these forces according to the wahi of Allah for the welfare of universal humanity is the stature of a mu'min. If different nations employ these forces for their own desires and self-interest, then its outcome will be universal chaos and imbalance. And that is what it means to have fire in the world. And this is the allegorical description of the story of Adam and its conclusion. We should remember that this verse 39 follows the verse 38, where Quran had said that if and when the guidance of Allah comes, if you follow that guidance, that is, formulate your system in the world based on the system of deen, then you will be free from all kinds of fear and grief. Our choices in this life have serious consequences attached to them. In verse 238, after guiding Adam regarding the divine guidance of the Quran, here Allah has shared the consequence of going against this guidance, i.e., making a choice to reject this guidance and even falsifying it. And the terms used are kufr and kazab. Kufr means to hide and cover up the guidance, the signs of which we see all around us, for example, in the physical world as well as in our psyche. And in terms of psyche, we know all kinds of psychological diseases and illnesses which exist in the world created by the man-made system. The biggest display is in the lands occupied by Muslims who read the Book of Allah regularly, yet their minds never go in the direction of the consequences of contravening the guidance of Allah on a daily basis. Qazab is another way to falsify the message of Allah by distorting its meanings and even telling lies, stating that this is what their version of Islam is. And we can see plenty of evidence for that in all sectarian versions of Islam. In this verse, the Quran has pointed to the fire which these people create for themselves and for others. We can see this fire across the world. For example, a perpetual state of fear across the earth belonging to Allah. That is, the earth belongs to Allah, but man has been given finite stay on this earth and he is making mess out of it. Then the Quran informs us, based on evidence, that since whatever we do affects ourselves, hence the non-deen system will never produce those effects which are the exclusive domain of the system of deen. And this is the important aspect which we should keep in mind, that the system of deen, which is reflected from the beginning to the end in the Quran, that tells us that what kind of worldly paradise we can create by following this system. Since there is no death for the human self, such people will always remain in the state of owners of fire, that is Ashabun Nar, in this life as well as in the life of the hereafter. And that is the beauty of this verse, that the Quran calls it Ashabun Nar, that these people will own this fire which they have created themselves through their kufr and kazab. The Quran helps us to identify this invisible fire related to our psyche. Next verse, verse 40, historical evidence of Bani Israel is presented as a simile to explain the practical side of the account of Adam. And here we enter into a very interesting phase of our study of the Quran, that Bani Israel, that is the followers of the messenger Musa at that time, their example is presented by the Quran to illustrate the issues at this point, particularly between verses 30 and 38. Ya Bani Israel askuru ne'mati allati an'amtu alaykum wa awfu bi ahdi ufe bi ahdikum wa iyaya farhabun. The principle which is noted above, i.e., the nation which will live life according to the divine laws, will remain successful, and the one which will go against these will become destroyed. Its living example is that of the nation of Bani Israel, which at this time, O Messenger, is intensely opposing these laws. Say to them that bring that era of your history in front of you when you used to live life according to the laws of Allah. Because Bani Israel were also given the revelation through the messenger Musa, and once they started following it, they witnessed a lot of prosperity and success collectively in their life. You had witnessed how many conveniences and comforts, successes and eminences were available to you as a result of following the message of Allah. Then you abandoned that path, the outcome of which is before you, i.e. humiliation and disgrace in the whole world. And Quran has gone into a lot of detail of this humiliation and disgrace, and we will go through it subsequently once we proceed in the Quran. Now, once again, such an opportunity has arisen that if you so desire, you can reclaim your lost paradise by following my laws, fulfill your agreement, and then see how I fulfill my responsibilities, which I had promised in return for this. For this, it is necessary that you remove the fear of all non-divine forces, and that is the crux of it. That is the focal point of the Quran, that you move your mind, move your focus away from the man-made system and its ideology, come to the ideology presented by the Quran, and then see how the changes start taking place individually as well as collectively. And only bow down before my laws and be fearful of the destructive consequences of contravening these, and remain cautioned. Human history is the account of the rise and fall of nations. The Quran helps us to understand the outcomes of the choices made by past nations. So whatever we are going through in these verses, we will see that this is equally applicable to the world of today, and it is applicable to Muslims as well. Here the Quran presents the account of Bani Israel to illustrate the two sides of its guidance. What happens to nations when they do not follow the divine laws, and how this situation becomes favorable when these laws are followed. One point we should keep in mind, that when these verses were revealed at that time, Bani Israel, that is Jews, were residing in the peninsula of Arabia, and they were creating problems for this newly formed Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen who were trying to follow the Quran. This is the pattern through which the Quran explains its guidance, i.e. through examples of the rise and fall of past nations. We can witness this taking place before our eyes in today's world. Our efforts are also part of this phenomenon. So we can apply all these, what these verses are discussing, to our present state of affairs in the world. 2 points we should remember in relation to history: that the law of cause and effect operates in the human world, and the uniform application of this law across the universe. And this is important, particularly for passing on to our children, that the law of cause and effect works everywhere in the universe, and it is uniformly applicable to this earth as well as to any other part of the universe. This means that in relation to the collective life of any nation, we need to analyze its conduct objectively using the permanent values of the Quran. That is, if there is an effect, and then there must be a cause as well. This will aid us in studying its existing path and the direction in which it is leading this nation. So we cannot deceive ourselves. If something is going on wrong, for example, today, we should go back in the history and see where it started. And then we can project it in the future and see where it is leading us to. Here in this verse, the Quran has reminded Bani Israel and Muslims of all times. And it is quite interesting. What Quran is talking about Bani Israel, we can apply it to the Muslims of today who are behaving like the people of the book of the time in which Messenger and his companions existed. That being possessors of the book of Allah, it is important to live up to its criteria in order to obtain the benefits associated with obedience to it. This aspect will become clearer as we go through the subsequent verses and the Quran. Now we go to the next verse, 41. Man has the intellectual potentials to understand, accept, and follow the divine guidance. وَآمِنُوا بِمَا أَنزَلْتُ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَكُمْ وَلَا تَكُونُوا أَوَّلَ كَافِرٍ بِهِ وَلَا تَشْتَرُوا بِآيَاتِي ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا وَإِيَّايَ فَاتَّقُونِ. Its practical procedure is that you should accept Iman in that code of laws that is revealed in the Quran, which we have sent down on this messenger. This, other than other matters, will make all those claims truthful which exist among you ideologically. That is, the books which were tampered, and these existed with the people of the book at that time. Since his teaching is fundamentally the same which was bestowed on you some time ago, and which is not with you in its original form, hence you should have leapt towards it quickly. And this was expected, that since the Quran was being revealed, and it had some aspects which were also revealed in the books of Christians as well as Jews, they should have come to it and realized that this is the source of this revelation is the same, that is Allah Himself. But contrary to this, you started to oppose it even before others. Do not do this. And we have gone through this psychological aspect as well, that a lot of other human beings, they do not come to the Quran because of their own belief system, because they are quite comfortable with the beliefs they have, and also they are the beneficiaries of that belief system. We know that you have some worldly advantages due to religious leadership, and your self-invented beliefs and customs are becoming the reason for your tribalism, abandoning which is hard on you. Because people wish to follow the majority, because their benefits are attached with that majority. But the sum total of benefits which you will receive through obedience to this code will far exceed those, hence live life according to it. The nation claiming to possess the book of Allah can cause tremendous harm if it resorts to kufr. Here the Quran has touched upon a few aspects of the guidance and appealed to the human psyche to remind itself about the importance of the guidance of Allah. When we read the book of Allah, we come across many verses which point to the rewards resulting from obeying His laws. For example, in verse 38, Quran said, فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. That if you followed this guidance, then you will have no fear and grief. That is freedom from fear and grief, which means that we can only desire to follow it if we experience fear and grief in our collective life in the world, and then we wish to address it. If we do not feel fear and grief, in fact, we are the ones who are creating fear and grief in the world, then Quran will not appeal to us. The main aspects of the revelation of Allah have remained immutable. For example, the permanent values. However, the previous people of the book introduced contamination in this message and corrupted it. This can be verified through the Quran. And this is a very interesting comment made over here in the light of this verse, that people still, we see in the world, they follow all those man-made and tampered messages which they associate with their own concept of God. And they are quite happy with that because these tampered books follow their own desires. And they can, even now they can amend them, alter them according to their own needs and according to their own wishes. That is why there are so many editions of all these books which they claim are the divine books. The Quran arrived and declared that its message is preserved for all times, thus eliminating the need for a messenger of Allah for all times. And this is a good thing in the case of the Quran, that we can always go back to the original Arabic and then see that how the original message puts forward the system of deen in which there is no contradiction. But if we see on all these expositions and translations which people have done without thinking of the system of deen, there are contradictions among these translations and also expositions. And that is why one can never be able to establish the system of deen based on these translations and interpretations. In this verse, we are reminded that in order to obtain these benefits, as noted in the Quran, we should become mu'min and not display kufr towards it. And Quran over here says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا أَوَّلَا كَافِرٍ بِهِ. You are the people of the book, and you know some parts of it which are quite similar to what is revealed in the Quran. And now you are the ones who are denying it. You are not willing to look through it rationally. Today, since Muslims are also displaying kufr towards the book of Allah, hence our attention should also be directed in this aspect. And this is another important point which comes out of this verse, is that despite most of the Muslims saying that this is the book of Allah, that is, they believe that Quran is the book of Allah, still they don't want to refer to it to solve their own issues, and they use it for some kind of an abstract reward. By ending the verse with the admonishment, فَإِيَّايَ فَاتَّقُونَ, the Quran has asked us to become muttaqeen. It declares, for example, right at the beginning of Surah Al Baqarah, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. That is, this is the book in which There are no suspicions, no doubts. That is, it helps to remove all uncertainties, all doubts, all suspicions existing within man-made system or within human psyche, and it provides guidance for those who are wishing to follow the path of Allah and avoid the risks of life. We go to the next verse, 42. An important aspect of the non-Quranic human psyche. Mu'mineen need to be vigilant regarding this. وَلَا تَلْبِسُوا الْحَقَّ بِالْبَاطِلِ وَتَكْتُمُوا الْحَقَّ وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. And this is an interesting verse following after that is telling Bani Israel that now the Quran has arrived, which is free from any types of contamination and tampering, which you will find in your own books. And now Quran points to them that once this message has come to you, this is what you are doing and this is your practice. The present conduct of yours is that sometimes by completely veiling the truth, you do not let it appear before the public so that they could make an informed choice. And at other times, by mixing your own self-made shariat with wahi, you mix al-Haqq and Batil in such a way that Batil appears as al-Haqq. And you do all this deliberately and consciously for your vested interests. And we can easily understand that because this is going on all over the world, even people who are not people of the book and they follow some kind of other religions or even atheists or secular minds. That what they do is they are mixing truth with some kind of lies so that people cannot approach truth as the truth should be. Haqq and Batil clearly defined by the Quran. We should keep in mind that Haqq means all those things which produce positive, constructive results, and they are through and through based on truth. They are absolute facts, like sun rises in the east and we can see when the sun rises. Similarly, we can see the way physical laws work. They are all al-Haqq. For example, the way our physical body works is al-Haqq. Similarly, the way permanent values work, these are al-Haqq. And this is what is revealed in the Quran. Here the Quran has highlighted an important negative aspect of the human psyche, displays of which we witness in the world of today. Here the addressee includes the religious leadership, but now the media has also been added as man has acquired extensive communication technology and skills. We can witness the mixing of facts with lies, and this is going on in our world on media all around us, as well as lies being broadcast across the world in every direction. This has become the hallmark of all man-made systems. The Quran here has leveled a serious charge against the Jews and their religious leaders that they mix al-Haqq with Batil. Batil is that which is based on relative values and will never ever produce constructive results in the long run. In the shorter run, people might succeed in deceiving others and deceiving themselves, but in the long run, its results will always be negative and destructive. And al-Haqq is which will always produce constructive results both in the short term as well as in the long term. And cover up al-Haqq or hide it, and they do this knowingly. Why do they do this? It is because they do not believe that the life will go beyond death. They do not believe in their own accountability. This aspect has been covered in many other verses. For example, to mislead people from the path of Allah, to obtain some financial benefits, are due to disliking the book of Allah and Allah Himself, not liking those who project the system of deen based on the pure Quran. For example, Tolu Islam. And we should keep it in mind that it is not that they do not like Tolu Islam or they do not like people who pass on the message of Allah and invite them towards the system of deen. They actually dislike the book of Allah and they do not want to hold themselves accountable. And they don't have that iman which the Quran has put forward. This aspect is now applicable to Muslims as well. So here, instead of Bani Israel, we can replace it the Muslims of 2026, as they also do it deliberately across the world and as a result live a life of humiliation and backwardness. And this is based on evidence. Let us go to the next verse, 43. The system of Salat and Zakat will lead to addressing issues of the human psyche, will change the outer world. And this is an interesting thing that the verse 42 is talking about Haqq and Batil and its mixing, and of course covering up Haqq with Batil. And the next verse addresses the issue of Salat and Zakat. Waqimus salata wa atu zakata warka'u ma'ar raki'in. So that means if we want to avoid that conflict of Haqq and Batil, which people do, we should establish the system of Salat and Zakat. And of course, warka'u ma'ar raki'in, pointing towards the collective system. You should abandon this path of yours, and after making the Quran your code of life, establish the system of Salat and make the means of nourishment available for mankind. And in this way become the companions of those who bow their heads in front of the divine laws. Importance of establishing the system of Salat. Here the solution to the batil behavior described in previous verse, that is 42, is put forward by the Quran. People of the book who are supposed to live a guided life in order to draw benefits for themselves as well as to save humanity from suffering under the man-made systems need to think hard to extricate themselves from the plight in which they find themselves trapped. After pointing to their destructive psyche, the Quran has invited them to mend their ways and extricate themselves from their existing plight by working towards the system of Deen, whose two pillars are noted here, i.e. the system of Salat and Zakat. In another verse, the Quran has detailed two important features of the system of Salat. Waqimis salata inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. It will protect the society from injustices and evil deeds. And this is all covered under Fasha and Munkar. So we can add to the system of Salat, that is not to mix Haqq and Batil, or under that system there will be no mixing of Batil and Haqq. Haqq will stay Haqq and everyone will know what al-Haqq is. By ending the verse with Warka'u Ma'ar Raki'in, attention is drawn towards the collective organizational aspect of the system. And this is a very important point for us to take home from today's presentation, that it is a collective system. Salat and Zakat is a collective system. It is not left to the individual. We cannot have Salat and Zakat under the man-made systems. The appearance of this verse after al-Haqq and Batil points to the comprehensive nature of this command by the Quran. The present state of the ritualized form of Salat under man-made systems can never lead towards the system of Deen. It is about the transformation of the human psyche far ahead of the establishment of the system of Deen. The difference between Ruku and Sajda. What I've done over here is I've taken some excerpts from volume 2 and I thought to share these over here. From this verse, it is clear that the meaning of Ruku is obedience to the laws of Allah and to accept His rule. We have said above that this is also the meaning of Sajda, but in linguistic terms, to bow down partially is called Ruku and to prostrate fully is called Sajda. Although these words are synonymous in meaning, obedience, when the Quran has used these two words separately, then their difference appears to be understood as follows. So Ruku means that is the bending down, and Sajda is going right down to the earth to put our forehead on the ground. So physically, these are the metaphors of following our obedience, the laws of Allah. The beginning of the invitation of Deen commences from that nation who is either totally ignorant of these truths or is not acting on them. Their way of living is totally against these, and since this way is rooted in their mentality and continuing throughout centuries, taking them out of this condition and leading them towards the goal of Deen is a lengthy journey. And we are seeing that process, that as and when Deen will come, it has to progress very slowly on an evolutionary pace till the time people, or the majority of the people, rationally accept the procedures and sub-clauses of all the permanent values of that system. The requirement of psychological knowledge is that this change in them should be brought about gradually. For example, even on this platform, we have seen that we are going through these aspects gradually and applying these to our psyche, which is changing slowly in this direction. For example, we have seen that in the economic system of the Quran, its ultimate goal is to make available what is beyond your needs. And it is very difficult to ask people to make available beyond their needs once the system of deen is established, i.e., to hand over to the state all that is beyond one's own need. But it is obvious that this goal can only be reached gradually. This is the reason that the commands for sadaqah and charity and individual help for the needy are also found in the Quran, even to the extent of commands regarding inheritance. Because once the system of deen is fully matured, then of course there is no question of any inheritance or anyone accumulating any wealth, because everyone's physical needs are met adequately, and then they know that these are being met adequately. And once they have iman in Allah and the hereafter and their own accountability, then they willingly accept every aspect of that system of deen, because they know it is working for their welfare and for their self-development. It can be clearly seen that these commands relate to this transitional period, after going through which the Jamaat will be caused to reach its final goal. We go to the next verse, 44. Serious flaw of following sectarian religious practices highlighted. The next verse points to another very serious flaw in the psyche of human beings, and once this is displayed by people of the book or people who claim to be Muslims, then it becomes extremely serious and mankind suffers under this flaw. أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. And I have highlighted bir and tatlun al-kitab and then taqilun. One consequence of this hiding of the truth and mixing of all Haqq and Batil is that strange kinds of contradictions and hypocrisy have become created in your life. And this is something on which we should concentrate repeatedly. What this hypocrisy and contradiction is being displayed by Muslims across the world every day. You admonish others that they should adopt the path of welfare and expanded vision, and that is bir. But when it comes to your own selves, you forget all this sermonizing and admonishing. And together with this, you are also a claimant of this, that you obey the book of Allah. And this is interesting, that if we go and ask Muslims, they think that they are following the book of Allah. Just pause and reflect using your rational mind and reasoning, that will the book of Allah provide you the teaching of following this kind of path? And that is what taqilun means, that they should pause and reflect and see what exactly they are doing to their own psyche. And if they have contaminated and hypocritical psyche every day, 5 times in a day, then how are they going to establish the system of deen? The thought of deen cannot even cross their minds with that kind of contaminated psyche. Contradiction between word and deed. This verse points to a devastating charge against those who devoutly follow the religious practices and then satisfy themselves that they have carried out their religious duty as per the book of Allah. For example, the case of performing namaz, umrah, hajj, fasting, even 2.5% of zakat, which they want to give away on accumulated wealth, whereas the Quran has forbidden the accumulation of wealth in the first place. While yatim and miskeen exist in the word. And that is another important point, that yatim and miskeen exist in the word, and Quran has very clearly said what is its verdict on yatim and miskeen, for example, in Surah Al Baqarah. Here the Quran has pointed to a serious human character failing in which we say something to others or portray a positive character of ours in front of others, while we harbor a different inner self which is contradicting our true intentions. Under the man-made systems, this behavior is manifested frequently. For example, politicians across the world do it on a regular basis. The word keeps creating yatim and miskeen as we are sharing this presentation today. The Quran admonishes us repeatedly that under the functioning of the law of requital, nothing remains hidden and unnoticed. Both thoughts and deeds leave an impact on ourself, the center of which is our I, a strong sense of our identity. Here we are asked to pay attention to the precepts of the Book of Allah and not to take its verses lightly. And this is an important point, that if we are saying something and doing something different about it, and we are saying it, for example, 5 times in a day, that we will follow the Sirat al-Mustaqim given in the Quran and we will follow the laws of Allah, and then we never follow it, then what kind of psyche we possess and what kind of a world we will create. Be fully conscious of what you say to others, and this is what Quran says, and what you do to your own selves. It warns clearly, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. And we have gone through this verse in detail under this surah. And Quran is saying, and it is addressing those who claim to be mu'mineen, that don't say things which you are not going to do. So there must not be contradiction between word and deed. We go to the next 2 verses, 45 and 46. The path of deen needs steadfastness, patience, and becoming conscious of the law of requital. وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُو رَبِّهِمْ وَأَنَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Remember, the development of your potentials and the correct balance in your life will only become created when you remain firmly steadfast and determined on the system of Salat. We know that this path will appear to be very difficult and the destination very challenging. This is because you have become accustomed to living an easy life based on the hard work of others. But if you keep this in mind, that you are going to face Allah, that is His law of requital, that you cannot go outside the domain of His law, that each of your steps is moving in that direction, then definitely that inclination will become created in your heart, due to which man, by giving up his personal proclivities, bows down in front of the laws of Allah. A lot covered in these 2 verses, and again we can see that it is about the system, that is the Salat as well. And what Quran is saying is that be highly aware of what you are doing, and if you are following this path, then you should always remember that each passing day is taking you closer to your physical demise, that is death from this life. Now, on these 2 verses, becoming aware brings changes in our psyche on this path. That is what is covered in these 2 verses. The common translation of these verses is, nay, seek Allah's help with patient perseverance and Salat. It is indeed hard, except to those who bring a lowly spirit, who bear in mind the certainty that they are to meet their Rabb and that they are to return to Him. So these translations do not really bring out the true meaning of what is stated in these 2 verses. The first word is isti'anat, wasta'inu, to seek. And if we remember, this was covered under Surah Al-Fatiha at the beginning. To seek. In connection with sabr and salat, to what an extent isti'anat is a phase which is testing of patience and demanding of courage. That phase in which all kinds of losses have to be borne and difficulties have to be faced. This phase will be very arduous. And Salat, this means the shaping of that system in which the members of society keep obeying the divine laws. So first stage is that you are seeking it. You are actively going towards it, and you are making a deliberate decision that I want to follow what is given in the Quran. I want to follow its guidance because I'm not happy with the system of Taghut. The meaning of sabr is to confront oppositions with courage and resoluteness. That is, again, we have to create it within our own self, that the man-made system is taking us into wrong direction, and because this life is finite, my life will end with death. Hence, I take a different path, which is the path of Haqq. To stand up with such determination that there is not the slightest wavering in steadfastness. to make oneself so balanced that the shocks emanating from world events do not cause the slightest tremor in its resolve. And this is something about which we should caution ourselves, warn ourselves, that once you take up the ideology which is put forward by the Quran, and this ideology is from Allah Himself, then we have to create that strength, that resoluteness, that patience within us, that determination which keeps us on this path individually as well as collectively. Some more elaboration. Due to centuries of slavery, subjugation, displacements, being devoid of any center of leadership, the potentials of steadfastness and resoluteness were extinct in Bani Israel, and it is equally applicable to Muslims of today. The Quran has described at a number of places how low their weakness and lack of courage had sunk. The word khashiyat, which is used, also appears in this verse. The basic meaning of this root is that due to knowing the outcome of some act, to be apprehensive about it and to eschew it. It is quite similar to being muttaqi, that is to be very, very careful, be alert, be cautious, taking all the precautions. In verse 23, it is stated about the message that is about the Quran, illa tazkiratan liman yaksha, same root, that is yaksha, but only as an admonition to those who fear, that is, who fear the consequences of doing wrong, fear the consequences of following batil. The word Yazunnun appears in verse 246. Ordinarily, the word zan is used in opposition to haqq and certainty. If the latter an or anna comes after this, for example, in this verse it says, Allazina yazunnuna annahum, then its meaning is that of being nearer to certainty. Therefore, from this is meant those people who always keep this thought in mind that according to Allah's law of requital, we have to give an account of all our words and deeds, i.e., their consequences will certainly appear before us. And of course, we have to be aware of our words and deeds, that there is no contradiction between them. Now we go to verse 47. Obedience of Allah's laws will always produce eminent outcomes as noted in the Quran. Ya Bani Israel askuru ni'mati allati an'amtu alaykum wa anni fazzaltukum alal alameen. The verse is more or less repeated, which we had experienced at the beginning under 240. We do not need to tell you what is the outcome of bowing heads in front of these laws. You have witnessed its outcomes with your own eyes when you had achieved all kinds of conveniences due to this, and you had become possessors of an eminent status among your compatriot nations, so much so that no other nation could compete with you. The other nations cannot compete because they follow relative values, and if a nation emerges which follows permanent values, they have to be ahead of others because they have developed selves as well as they are putting in their best in the physical domain. And this is very obvious from the concept of deen given in the Quran. The Quran has 100% recipe for worldly success, which is unfamiliar to decline. And this is an important point, that once we follow Sirat al-Mustaqim and we follow the Quranic guidance, absolutely there is no question of decline at any point in the future. Because once we start following the permanent values, we are in congruence with the divine attributes. Here the Quran has countered the bad behavior of Bani Israel and reminded them about their past glory and eminence, when they had followed the divine guidance and reaped its benefits. The Quran has made it clear that all this takes place according to Allah's law of Mashiach. He selects whichever individual he wishes for wahi, and that is the messengers of Allah. And then whoever wishes, he can benefit from the good and blessing of that wahi. So our position is that we got fully preserved book of Allah called the Quran, and there is no more messenger coming from his direction because there is no need to send any more messengers. The table laden with his neema, that is his bounties, is accessible to every individual. Whoever wishes to take something can stretch out his hand and take it. It is a simple matter of knowing His laws and values as clearly noted in the Book of Allah and then making a deliberate choice to follow the procedure which is clearly signposted. If we analyze this verse in reverse order, then it will mean if any nation wishes to acquire the fadl, that is the abundance, prosperity, superiority, and non-declining future of Allah, then it needs to come to the Quranic system of deen and follow its procedure, and a world free from fear and grief will fall within its reach. This success will extend beyond this physical life of theirs. That is, it will extend into the life of the hereafter as well, because it will include the developed selves. The last verse of today's presentation, 48, this is the hallmark of the deen of Allah. وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا لَا تَجْزِي نَفْسٌ عَنْ نَفْسٍ شَيْئًا وَلَا يُقْبَلُ مِنْهَا شَفَاعَةٌ وَلَا يُؤْخَذُ مِنْهَا عَدْلٌ وَلَا هُمْ يُنصَرُونَ. After abandoning this system, your state had become such that respect for constitution and laws and taking care of justice and fairness totally disappeared among you. So Quran is continuing narrating the state of Bani Israel to them through the lips of the Messenger of Allah and his companions at that time. And now, of course, we are aware of it as we go through the Quran ourselves as Muslims. But now this injustice and chaos cannot last long. Now with the establishment of the Quranic system, that era is going to arrive fairly quickly, when no individual will be able to share the burden of another one. Everyone will face the punishment of his own misdeeds. Nor will the intervention of anyone be of any use, nor will anyone be released by taking something in return, that is as bribe for his crime. And nor will any person be able to access the help of some criminal. Because the system of deen is not in place, so actually now Muslims should remind themselves by going through these verses which appear to be addressing Bani Israel at that time. And now these are of course addressing the whole of mankind and particularly Muslims of today because they claim to possess this book. This will happen in this world when the system of justice of the Quran will be established, and also in the hereafter, when all decisions will be according to the law of requital of Allah. And this verse also tells us that what is wrong with the world in which we are living and what is wrong with the lands in which Muslims are residing. And we can see all the problems which are pointed in this verse, saying that all these must not exist in our life, in our system, if we are following the law of Allah. Next slide is, nothing can escape the grip of the law of requital of Allah. No one will be treated unjustly. And this is the beauty of this verse. It tells us that if we follow the Quran and the system given in the Quran, then we will have a trouble-free world, a world which will be totally free from all kind of injustices. And it will be a very transparent system where everyone will know their rights and they will also know their responsibilities, and they will all have Iman in Allah and the hereafter. At least they will understand what it means to have Iman in Allah and what it means to be held accountable and what it means to possess a self which can be developed and which can qualify itself for the life of the hereafter. The verse points to the traits of becoming muttaqi, which includes understanding the functioning of the law of requital. Implicit in this verse is the fact that whatever choices we make have consequences individually as well as collectively. It is about making it clear to man that his fate is 100% in his own hand. And what a confidence one gets if one accepts this Iman and sees how the law of requital functions, that my fate is in my hand 100%. Stop looking for excuses and follow the Quran and experience the emergence of a new life. None of our choices can escape their consequences, whether we are functioning under the man-made systems or under the system of deen. The difference is that under deen, people will become more aware of the functioning of the law of requital and its link with human self-development. So it is our duty as students of the Quran that not only be familiar with the working of the law of requital, which should be evidence-based, but we should try to convince others as well. let them know as well. Wherever people say that it is in my kismat or this is the way it is written in my fortune, we should stand up and tell them that, look, everything follows laws. There is no kismat. There is no question of any chance in our world. It is human beings who create problems, and it is human beings who solve problems. Hence, awareness of this law and becoming conscious of its working is a prerequisite to becoming those mu'mineen who become established in the land as per the Quran. Under the man-made systems, unguided minds function within the thinking related to the accountability under the human laws existing in a particular land or country. This aspect is very deceptive, as it does not tell us that our self is being impacted by every choice we are making. And we come across people like that who somehow associate their physical successes with the man-made system to some kind of a divine blessing. That is wrong to assume. We should move away from that kind of faulty mentality, because man-made systems do not give us those benefits of self-development which the system of Deen is going to provide. They satisfy some of our animalistic level needs, that is the needs of our body, but these systems simply cannot deal with the development of the human self to which the Quran has pointed our attention, because the values are different. The man-made system functions on relative values. The Quran functions on the permanent values. That this is going to decide where we end up after death or life in the hereafter. With that, we come to the end of this talk. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.